York, big city of dreams. New York, big city of dreams.
What's going on? It's Jail. It's from Knick Of Time Show. Here to give you that Knicks talk just in the nick of time. And we're back just in time to talk about some big Knicks news. And I'm joined by my man, the Latin assassin, Lee Escobedo. What's going on, Lee?
Let's go. It's summertime, baby. We outside. Lots of Knicks rumors to go over. Some big ones. Some wild ones popping up today, man.
Wow. Well, we're gonna talk about two of them tonight. Also, shout out to my man Ryan G, who's really outside. Can't wait to have you back, Ryan. All right, let's get to it. News. Big news have been circulating, but we're gonna talk about it. We're gonna talk about Paul George, and we're also gonna talk about James Harden. Okay, so I'm actually talk about Paul George first. This has been news that says the Clippers and Knicks have been in talks about a potential trade for Paul George, which was, was kind of shocking to me. But, when you look at what Paul George is, and you look at the type of player that the Knicks need next to Jalen Brunson, because we do need a legit number two, Paul George, or that archetype is it, that two-way defender, that two-way player who can be an offensive guy, who can put the ball in the basket, but it can also be that defender that backs up Jalen Brunson defensively, can hit threes, can play off the ball, can play on ball some, and he's just he's a guy who is gonna give it to you every single game. And when you look at what type of player a Tom Thibodeau player is, Paul George fits that mold. But I have my reservations about it, and I'm sure Lee does too. But I'll throw the ball to you, Lee. What do you think about a potential Paul George to New York Knicks move?
Sifting through the dozens and dozens of ass crack player coming to New York rumors that happen every single year, this is the one that I think I've liked the most in recent memory. I agree with everything you said. He's a perfect fit. He's the big 6'8", 6'9" wing that we've needed during the entire Leon Rose era. I think RJ Barrett would be involved in any trade for Paul George. He replaces RJ Barrett as a more go-to, playoff-ready, playoff-tested second option. He's probably the best beta player in recent NBA history. I don't mean that as a slight. I mean as someone who has fully embraced the role of a second option, and he does it better than anyone else in the NBA. He's someone that if your first option is being triple teamed, guaranteed Paul George getting you a bucket. Whether it's a three, a mid-range, a post-up, or driving to the basket, you can also lock down the opposing team's best perimeter defender and can play some defense in the post as well, since now in the modern NBA, most big guys aren't, the bruising Charles Oakley's. They're more in the mold of Al Harrington nowadays, and Paul George can body up on some of those guys. He's a stud. My only reservation, the only one I have, isn't even what the trade package would be. It's that extension. If he won't demands an extension upon being traded, that's where I'm out. Because I think right now at 33 years old and at the very tail end of his prime, I think his image and perception of himself is around the $45, $50 million. And his contract ends when he's 35. Any extension year is you're getting to one of those contracts that will be one of the worst in the NBA. If you're paying Paul George at 36, 37, or 38 years old, over $40 million a year, I'm out. But if it's IQ, OB, RJ in a pick, sign me up. Paul George coming and pairing up Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, that is a championship trio.
It's funny. Well, he has 2 years left on his deal, $45.6 million, $48.8 million, respectively. But to your point, Lee, the trade package to me is still going to be something I would worry about because of his age, because of his injury history. He hasn't played over 60 games in 4 seasons. That's almost half a decade of not. he has a lot of the same ailments that a lot of these stars available has. Is they're just not available. Best ability is availability, and he just has not been available. The Clippers, by all intents and purposes, they're supposed to be a championship team, really. And when you look at their team with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, you're thinking, man, they should have been in the finals a few times, but these guys really haven't played that many games together. There's been a lot of load management happening with Paul George, and as much as I love him, man, it would hurt to have him only play 50 something games during the season and then come into the playoffs and then miss the playoffs and then now he's 34 and now he's 35. So this one is tough. This one is like it would really hurt to put RJ in a trade like this. And in my mind it would be RJ because in my mind it would be RJ. Because, just because I just saw Julius Randle chopping it up with this guy on his own podcast, I would think that optic makes me believe that Paul George would want to play with Randle. I guess some of the Knicks fans would never thought you heard that said out loud. Somebody wants to play Randle. But that's what it made it seem like. But on the flip side, for a Clipper, if they're trying to win a chip and they have Kawhi Leonard there, do they want RJ Barrett back as a piece to win the chip? Because I don't see RJ Barrett as a win now piece. You know what I mean? So it's interesting. Like, I almost feel like the Clippers might want, this might sound crazy, but I almost feel like the Clippers might want Randle over Barrett because of the all NBA status and he can draw double teams and he's available most of the time. That's my thought anyway. I don't know if you have anything to say about what I just said. Any of the points.
Yeah, there's two that stuck out to me. The first one is I'm not 100% sold that any trade between the Clippers and the Knicks involving Paul George would be a two-team trade. I think there's potential for it to be a 3-team trade and a trade that involves Philadelphia and James Harden. It made sense that Harden would be the one that would join the Clippers, Paul George would join the Knicks, and then Philly would get players that both complement Embiid now and also secure the future if Embiid demands to be traded later on, which is why I think Emmanuel quickly reuniting with his Kentucky backcourt mate Maxey made sense. Obi Toppin is a starting forward on Philly, and RJ Barrett then would become the starting small forward with the 76ers as well. If it's a straight up swap between Clippers and Knicks, I agree. The RJ Barrett piece makes it less. It's not completely out of a question, I think, for them to get RJ. He's been 20 points per game for like 3 seasons in a row. So he still helps because they're still employing Terrence Mann as essentially their fourth option. So I think RJ Barrett to slide in there as well is even potentially the third option on that team, depending on who else stays and who else goes. The second point about games missed, that's true. To me, I can live with the 50 in the last 3 seasons. 2 out of 3 have been like a little bit over 50 games played. I can live with that in the regular season as long as he's healthy in the playoffs. That's really the only thing I care about. Paul George has to be available come postseason, and we know that's not always the case. But I think on a 2-year contract, it's worth the risk. That's why I'm so adamant that extension has to be off the table, and Leon Rose has to table it for when that time comes, which is usually how Leon Rose operates. Then you can start having a conversation on maybe a cheaper descending contract. But right now, those 2 years, to me, they're worth the risk because those 2 years would coincide with Julius Randle entering his prime and Jalen Brunson almost entering his prime. And I think it's a risk because it gives you one of the best trios in the NBA.
Man, it's one of those things where I can definitely see the reward, but man, when I think about sustainable winning, you know what I mean? Because it's like, all right, Jalen Brunson has done something to this team with his success, and that is he's moved the timeline up. He's like sped it up significantly. So you're starting to think, man, maybe we should trade for this player because we have this window to do something with Jalen Brunson before we have to re-up and pay him. So I can see why Knicks might be trying to get more win now moves. But me personally, this is the hard part of figuring out who to trade for because there's not a lot of players who fit this criteria. But I would rather somebody like in that 27 range and not like upwards 30 range to give us like a little bit more runway to have a little bit more sustainability before we sacrifice a few young pieces for like a two-year window to win like a chip or something. You know what I mean?
I think that's a really fair argument to make. And I think it's maybe the best argument to make against a Paul George trade is probably a conversation that Leon Rose and company are having right now internally. And they should. I mean, they're smart enough to have that to be in part of a conversation. To me, it's like, who else you going after?
Yeah.
All the options that are available. The guys who are untouchable are untouchable.
Yeah.
But the ones who are plausible as possibilities all have some type of negative aspect of them as a player that will deter you from possibly, selling a good portion of your assets to go get. I think Paul George, in terms of skill set, is probably the best of all the guys that we've ran through, the Bradley Beals, the Zach LaVines. I think he's the most skilled and the true number 2 option that has taken the team as number 1 option to the playoffs multiple years in a row with Indiana. But the injury concerns are serious, and to me, the extension, as I heard rumors that he wanted an extension conversation to happen upon being traded, and if that's the case, I'm out.
Yeah, that's definitely a situation. And even with this new CBA coming up, there's people who want certain numbers. And I kind of feel like there might be like a little bit of a rude awakening for the mid-tier to lower tier levels guys. Like I feel like the averages of the salaries might go down a little bit because of the CBA, even though the cap is going up slightly, but that's like a whole another thing. Just another thing too is just this. When I think about the list of people who will be perfect fit next to Jalen Brunson, it's really two-way wings.
Right.
And there's really not a lot of those guys out there. There's really not like a lot of legit two-way wings. It's like there's Paul George, Jimmy Butler, Levine. Levine is like 1.5. You know what I'm saying? Like his defense is passable.
Butler's not available.
Huh?
Butler's not available.
Butler's exactly. My man from the Celtics. Jaylen Brown, who's almost impossible to get at this point because of his price tag and where he is. Like the guys who are perfect next to Jalen Brunson is not a lot of those guys available, I don't think. Maybe Ant-Man. So it makes it tougher to really make the right move with the right age range and the right guy who doesn't have that crazy injury history. So I do not envy the Knicks front office because we do have Jalen Brunson who will attract people, but we also don't have that prototype here that fits next to every Jalen Brunson perfectly. Like really. Klay Thompson, maybe you can throw him in there. Old Klay Thompson, I guess. But you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But you brought up James Harden, so let's transition into the James Harden news. This one shocked the hell out of me. The Clippers and Knicks are expected to be among the teams that will engage with the Sixers on a potential James Harden trade, sources tell. Engage is an interesting word. It's a very interesting word because when news broke about Paul George, the news said potential trade for Paul George. Potential trade. When news broke about James Harden, it said engage. So engage could mean a few things. You know what I mean?
It can mean a 3-team trade.
Exactly. It can mean three-team trade, and it can mean the Knicks are interested. Now, subsequently, Ian Begley followed up with some news that said, and I quote, heard Knicks' interest in James Harden at the moment is far from uniform throughout the organization. Clippers have strong interest in trading for Harden. Would assume Los Angeles Clippers' interest is stronger than NYK's presently. So it seems like, it's not uniform throughout the Knicks. So to me, that signals, all right, if there's one guy who's in the front office who's interested, that means I don't feel like the Knicks are going to push all their chips in the middle. They're going to be like, here's one chip. What do you think? Like, they're going to try to discount. They're going to be shopping at a discount rate. That's how I see it. Yeah, do you agree?
I agree 100%, and I'm gonna go in hypothetical mode. We talked about this through text, and once again we had ESP. I feel like the conversation that's happening right now, Worldwide West is on board with James Harden. If I have to pick one guy who I think is after Harden and wants to be Harden, it's him.
Most
Then
definitely.
you probably have Brock Aller. If it's like cap wise, you get this guy on this 1 year opt-in, he's gonna want the bag. And now we're cash strapped and committed to him for the next 3 to 4 years. The core we have, once we give up whoever it is, probably quickly, maybe Obi, RJ, that's a team that is in place, barring a major trade moving forward. And then you probably have Leon Rhodes, who's thinking about the failed Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker experience.
Yeah.
Does he want to give Tibbs another defensive, inefficient backcourt next year? Now, Harden gives you a lot in terms of playmaking
Yes.
and three-point shooting.
Yes.
It's a huge upgrade over RJ. But RJ's a way better defender. And in my opinion, at this point, he's a way better at driving at the basket and finishing around the basket than James Harden is in his career, too. Harden's only getting worse. RJ's only getting better. And I don't know if I want to give up on RJ to get another vet that's past his prime and also is super, super ball dominant and was a part of Philly being the worst ISO team in the entire NBA. No one had more ISO. The only team that did more ISO than Dallas and New York was Philly. They were at the top of the list in terms of ISO possessions in the regular season and the playoffs. And you saw where that got them. Do we want to add another on-ball dominant ISO-centric guy to this Knicks team? I don't.
I definitely do not. And man, I'm gonna put back on one thing. RJ was pretty bad defensively last season, so I don't know who's worse, but RJ was pretty bad. But
I'll take RJ over Harden.
Other than that, though, I pretty much agree. The playmaking, man. Harden averaged 10.7 assists last season, which is freaking incredible for a guy in his latter years who's trying to figuring out as his skill set, his burst is declining. And so while he did kind of start to fall off a little bit in terms of finishing around the rim and that burst, the passing has been still there. The IQ is still there. The 3-point shooting is still there. But like you said, the ISO ball to me is one of the biggest worries as a mesh with Julius Randle and Jalen Brunson, both guys who like the ball. You know, Jalen Brunson can play with ISO heavy guys. I want to move away from somebody who's super more ISO heavy, especially because he complained about it. He complained with the 76ers about, when Doc told him to move the ball and himself and then come back and get the ball. Right. Tom Thibodeau's going to pull his hair out with James Harden. Like, absolutely. Tom Thibodeau's going to pull his hair out with James Harden. The culture that we have set here in New York where guys are working hard, staying out till 1 a.m., 2 a.m., playing basketball at the gym, practicing. I'm scared of like a potential Harden coming here and like, I don't know if quickly will be here or not. Come on, quickly, come to the strip club with me. Come, let's go to the Bronx and throw some. Like, I don't know what type of domino effect James Harden is going to have on the nightlife and young players here. We've established a work hard culture here, and a superstar of that stature, I can see derailing that. So that definitely worries me as well.
Yeah, and I don't see him meshing with Tom Thibodeau's commitment to defense too. I think it's obvious that he didn't gel well with Doc Rivers, and Tibbs is in a lot of ways, a descendant of the Doc Rivers coaching tree. There's a lot of connections there with Jeff Van Gundy, but he was Doc Rivers' defensive architect for that championship Boston Celtic team and was on his bench for years before he went with the Chicago Bulls as a head coach. So there's a lot of similarities there. Lack of creativity, over reliance on isolation ball, a tendency to like switch everything.
Yeah.
That's the common thread between Doc and Tibbs. And I don't know if James Harden is going to acquiesce his game at all for a similar personality. They're also both yellers. They're both guys that like yell and demand and are harsh. I don't know if that gels where Harden has played his best ball with guys like Mike D'Antoni. And before that's Scotty Brooks in OKC, who were more player coaches, who let James do whatever he wanted on offense. That's not going to be the case here in New York. Mm-hmm. The ball is in Jalen's hands. Jalen makes the decisions. But he would really have to take a back seat to being a second option on ball, which wasn't the case in Philly. So I don't think it'll work, even for a really cheap discount. As the days gone on, I've been more and more out on this trade. I just think we should really walk away, and I think Leon Rose will.
I feel like for those who are Tom Thibodeau haters, I feel like a trade for James. I feel like James Harden is like a coach fire. Like I feel like if James Harden is traded to the Knicks, Thibodeau will be fired by February. Because he's the type of guy you've seen it in the playoffs. James Harden quit in the playoffs, like Game 7. Like he was standing around when he wasn't getting the ball. He was pouting, and he quit. And he's the type of player who will quit on you if he does not have his way. And players who quit is what get coaches fired. So
yes, outside of Scott Brooks, every coach has gotten fired under him. Once he left OKC and went to Houston, Kevin McHale was fired. Then Mike D'Antoni was fired, and then he got traded when they brought in what was it? I can't remember the guy who took over in the Houston Rockets, Steven Silas.
Yeah.
But then he went to Brooklyn. Steve Nash was fired. Now he went to Philly. Doc Rivers was fired. So it's definitely there's something there that I wouldn't know if I would call him a coach killer, but I think he has to be catered to at such a high level, but the coach loses the voice in the locker room. And that will clash immediately with Tibbs.
Yeah. So if you're playing 3-level chess and you don't like Tibbs, then maybe you do want James Harden.
That's awful. I would hate to be that kind of fan.
Yeah, but for me, who wants the Knicks to succeed and get to the next level and build on the success from last year, I would clear away from James Harden, even though he does give you 21 points, 10 assists, 38% from the 3-point line, and is an enormous talent. I just think he's not the right talent for us. And listen, man, we've done so well last year. I think we afford, some people might disagree with me, but I think we afford the right to be a little bit cautious because of our success last year.
And when you look at the player type and contract status of Paul George, that's a savvy move. It has cost, it has risks, but it's savvy. You're getting someone with only 2 years left on his deal. You're getting someone that plays both sides of the ball and is okay with being a second option. Harden is the opposite of all of those things. He's looking for a new contract. He's ISO heavy. He plays no defense. And he thinks he's better than he actually is. That is a 2005 New York Knicks move. Is to get a superstar at the very tail end of their career, but doesn't realize they're at the tail end of their career yet. Yeah, I'm off, man. No Harden for me.
Is Paul George at the tail end of his career? They're the same age.
Yes, I think they're at the same place in their career. I think Paul George's skill set will translate better into age 35, 36, 37 than James Harden.
All right. Here's how I see it. Personally, I would say no to both. If it happened, if we did get into Paul George, I'd be slightly less upset. But I'll also hope for the best because I know if Paul George is healthy, it's different. But personally, I'm being consistent with these free agent reviews. Injury history I take into a big account when it comes to sacrificing a treasure chest of assets. So I'm still on that boat for when it comes to those guys.
So you're out on both.
I'm personally out on both. More so on Harden, of course, than George. If George would become a Knick, I would embrace him. I would root for him. I would root for anybody here. But I might be a little bit more optimistic that it'll work long term. I don't know if he has to change his diet or, get around the clock masseuses on call. I don't know what he has to do. But if he's healthy, if he's healthy, we on that chip door. You know what I'm saying? We on that chip door if he's healthy.
I'm out on Harden. I'm 100% on Paul George as long as there's no extension. And I think if we add Paul George, it's going to be hard to shut me up because I'm be saying championship for next season. Even if he only plays 40 games, as long as the playoffs are part of those 40 games, we're winning it all. Let's go.
Let's go. All right. Enjoy talking to you, Lee. Shout out to my guy Ryan G. Hopefully I'll be back soon. But yeah, man, that's the show. I think we talked our talk. Tune in next time to watch Knick Of Time Show. Please hit that like button, subscribe button. That is our show. We out of here. Peace.
Let's go.
New York, big city of dreams. New York, big city of dreams.
NYC.